Good day to everyone. We will now discuss about deontology. This is the flow of our discussion. We begin by the definition of deontology, then the deontology of Immanuel Kant, which is the categorical imperative. Under that, we'll discuss the contrast of categorical imperative versus hypothetical imperative. Then we have formulations of categorical imperative and then the critique to Kant's deontology. Here are the references that we'll be using: the books of Articulo and Florendo, Babor, Castillo, Montemayor, and other internet sources. We go to the definition. Deontology is the science of moral duty ethics. It was first used in 1817. So it's from Greek word deont, which means duty, binding, obligation, rule, or imperative, plus the ology or logos, which is reason, knowledge, or study. So deontology is defined as an ethical theory that the morality of an action should be based on whether that action itself is right or wrong, under a series of rules rather than based on the consequences of the action. An example of deontology is the belief that killing someone is wrong. Deontological ethics are duty ethics, where an action is considered morally right if it is in accordance with some list of duties and obligations. With that, there are numerous deontological ethics, like the contractarianism. An action is considered morally right if it is in accordance with the rules that rational moral agents would agree to observe when entering into a social relationship for mutual benefit. This is also known as contractualism. Then we have divine command theory, moral actions based from the divine or the deity or God or from the sacred books. Then we have Ross deontological pluralism. Then we have Kantianism, which is our focus in this discussion, Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. So for example, Ross deontological pluralism, this is propounded by W.D. Ross in 1877 to 1971. He states that there are 7 prima facie duties that needs to be taken into consideration when deciding which duty should be acted upon. A prima facie right is the right of an individual has in any situation that is different from an absolute right, which is universal, inherent, and cannot be overridden in any circumstances. But prima facie can become an absolute right if there are no conflicting right. So here are the 7 examples: the beneficence, the non-maleficence, the justice, self-improvement, reparation, gratitude, promise keeping. So one of the examples of deontological ethics. Another is in the divine command theory. This is famous, the 10 Commandments. You're familiar with this, or from the Quran or from other sacred texts. But the focus we have in the deontology is the deontology of Kantianism, which is Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. To Kant, duty is the obligation to act from reverence, respect for, and obedience to the moral law. Since Kant contends that the will to perform an act is not governed by desire or inclination, duty therefore is absolute and unconditional, because duty is founded on one's reverence for the moral law. The moral law should be revered. According to Kant, the moral law on duty is a categorical or an absolute demand or command. That is why he calls his brand of morality categorical imperative. In contrast with Aristotelian Thomistic and the Christian view, or the other deontology that we mentioned a while ago, that the moral law comes from above or God, imposed and made known to man by human reason conscience, Kant assumed that it is reason itself that makes the law, and it is the same reason that obeys the law at the same time. So, Kant asserts the superiority of his theory of the categorical imperative over other theories of morality. For Kant, other theories of duty ethics are hypothetical imperative, while his deontology is categorical imperative. So we have here the difference between categorical and hypothetical. Hypothetical imperative will have this formula, which is if you desire A or not A, if you don't desire A, you should or you should not do B. Or in other statement, you should do this in order to have this. It commands not unconditionally but only conditionally. This would destroy the absolute binding nature of morality and would take morality merely relative or subjective. According to Kant, hypothetical imperative is shared by Christian ethics, which makes morality as means and never as an end itself. The Christian, for example, unlike the Kantian, does not do good merely for the sake of doing good, nor practice virtue for virtue's sake. The Christian ethics does good and practices virtue for an ulterior motive. He does this so that in order for that action, or in short, as a means to the ultimate end, to attain perfect happiness with God in heaven. So there is a condition in doing good. Unlike the categorical imperative, we'll have this statement, do A for the sake of A itself, and not unlike with the hypothetical that there is a condition. So we must do good because we must. It is our duty to do good. Categorical imperative is the name given by Immanuel Kant to the unconditional and unyielding principle of morality, a law by which reason unconditionally binds itself. An action is good only if done and motivated by the pure sense of duty or out of pure reverence for the law. If done from any other motive, the act may only be legal but not moral. If all men would act and live in accordance with this law, thereby guiding their actions and activities and their relationships with each other, there will be peace, prosperity, harmony, and happiness among all men and peoples on earth. Categorical imperative, unlike hypothetical imperative, does not rest on some interest, thus it binds unconditionally and morally. This theory focuses on the motive of an act and the means employed by an act. Categorical or absolute imperative, absolute command, assesses moral acts solely on the basis of the nature of the motive and the means used by the act, and not based on its consequences. If the motive and the means employed by the act are good, then the act becomes good regardless of its consequences. If telling the truth, for instance, is good, then the act of telling the truth is good, even when it is perceived by many will suffer from its consequences. The same is true of an unethical acts. If stealing is unethical, then the act of stealing is always unethical, even if it is likely to result in the happiness of many. This explains why it is called categorical morality. It is fixed, absolute, and conditional form of morality. He contends that it is the intention behind our acts that matters, and not the consequences our acts bear. In this thread of thought, Kant claims that the motive in moral acts cannot be happiness, pleasure, God, or religion, but duty. The measure of good motive or will or intention is in the context of duty. From this regard, Kantian morality can be qualified as an ethics of duty, and as such, it excludes pleasure, happiness, and God. In this brand of ethical dogma, it is maintained that man never acts morally because man wants to be pleased or to be happy with his actions, nor should man act morally because there is God who will reward his good actions after life. In Kantian ethical school, man acts morally because it is his duty to be moral.